Next, we're going to move on to implementing the ability to filter our tags and ingredients by those assigned to recipes. The first thing we're going to do, as always, is create some unit tests in order to test the behavior before we implement the feature. Let's go ahead and start by adding some tests to our test ingredients API. We'll start with the ingredients and then we'll move on to the tags. So at the top of the file, we're going to do import or from decimal, import decimal. Then underneath our models here, we're going to add, break these onto multiple lines. And then we're going to add a new model called recipe. So we're going to need that for our test. Then we're going to scroll to the bottom of the file and we're going to add a new test here. We'll just do def test filter ingredients assigned to recipes, self. And we'll do test listing ingredients to those assigned to recipes. It should be test listing ingredients by those assigned to recipes. Next, we're going to do in1 equals ingredient.objects.create self equals self.user name equals apples. Ingredient 2 equals ingredient.objects.create user equals self.user name equals turkey, and then recipe equals recipe.objects.create title equals apple crumble, time minutes equals 5, price equals decimal 450, and then user equals self.user. Then we're going to do recipe.ingredients.add in1. Next, we're going to type res equals self.client.get ingredients URL, and we're going to pass in assigned underscore only with the value 1. So what we're doing here is we're creating two ingredients, apples and turkey, and then we're creating a recipe called apple crumble. So we're adding apples as an ingredient to our recipe, and then we're making a HTTP GET request to the ingredients URL, passing in the parameters assigned only with a value 1. Next, let's do our assertions. So we'll do S1 equals ingredients serializer in1, S2 equals ingredients serializer in2, and then self.assert in s1.data res.data and self.assert not in s2.data res.data. So the assertions here are making sure that in the filtered response, we only receive ingredient 1 and we do not receive ingredient 2. The reason we do this is because ingredient 2 isn't assigned to any recipes. So this is an ingredient that we want to be filtered out of the response. Next, let's go ahead and make sure that the list is unique. So we're going to add a new test here, def test filtered ingredients unique self test filtered ingredients returns a unique list. And the reason we're adding this is because if you don't have the distinct on the result, then it may return duplicate values. So we're actually going to add a test to validate this for our response. So we'll do ing, short for ingredient, equals ingredient.objects.create, user equals self.user, name equals eggs, and then ingredient.objects.create, user equals self.user, name equals lentils. And we're not assigning the second ingredient to an object because we're not going to need it in this test. We just need to make sure the two ingredients exist so we can validate that duplicates are not returned. Then what we're going to do is recipe1 equals recipe.objects.create, title equals eggs benedict, time minutes equals 60, and price equals decimal 7 pounds or dollars or whatever the currency is. User equals self.user, so the recipe is going to belong to the authenticated user. Then we'll do recipe2 equals recipe.objects.create. Title equals herb eggs. And then time minutes equals 20. And price equals decimal 4 pounds. And user equals self.user. Then we'll do recipe1.ingredients.add ing, and then recipe2.ingredients.add ing. Now we'll do res equals self.client.get ingredients URL, and the parameters assigned only 1. And finally we'll do self.assert equal len res.data 1. Okay, so save the file. What we're doing here is we're creating 2 ingredients. One we're storing as the variable ing, the other we're just creating in the database. So the first ingredient is called eggs, and the second ingredient is called lentils. Then we're creating 2 recipes. So we have recipe 1, and that's going to be eggs Benedict, and recipe 2 is herb eggs. Then we are adding the ingredient eggs to both of these new recipes. So both of these recipes require eggs. And what we actually want to test in this test case is that the result of the ingredients that are returned are unique. So there may be a case where you have the same ingredient assigned to multiple recipes, and it returns that ingredient for each of the recipes it's assigned to. So because it's assigned to 2 recipes, it would return it twice. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen, and we do that by making this test here, and we are then calling assigned only, getting the response, and then checking the length of the response is 1. So that way we know that the item was only returned once. Great, so now we can move on to adding similar tests to our tags. So let's close these files, make sure they're all saved. Open up test tags API, and we're going to start by importing decimal. So we'll do from decimal, import decimal. And then underneath the models here, we've got tag. So we also want to import recipe below that. Then at the bottom of the file, we're going to add our test case. So we are going to add the test case, def test filter tags assigned to recipes, self, test listing tags to those assigned to recipes. Tag 1 equals tag.objects.create, user equals self.user, name equals breakfast. Tag 2 equals tag.objects.create, user equals self.user, name equals lunch. And then recipe equals recipe.objects, it should be capital there, recipe.objects.create, title equals green eggs on toast. And then time minutes equals 10. And then price equals decimal 250. User equals self.user. Recipe.tags.add tag 1. And then res equals self.client.get tags URL assigned only 1. And then S1 equals tag serializer tag 1. S2 equals tag serializer tag 2. Self.assert in. We want to check that s1.data is in res.data, and self.assert not in s2.data in res.data. Okay, so we're creating 2 tags, and then we're creating a recipe, and then we're assigning tag 1 to the recipe that we created. Then we're filtering the tags by those assigned only, and we're making sure that only tag 1 appears in the result. That's what we do for this test. Now let's move on to def test filtered tags unique. And we want to make sure that the tags that we're returning are unique. So we'll do test filtered tags returns a unique list. Tag equals tag.objects.create. User equals self.user. Name equals breakfast. And then tag.objects.create user equals self.user and name equals dinner. And then we have recipe1 equals recipe.objects.create title equals pancakes, time minutes equals 5, and price equals decimal. And then user equals self.user. Then we'll do recipe2 equals recipe.objects.create title equals porridge, and time minutes equals 3, and price equals decimal 2.00, and user equals self.user. Then we'll do recipe1.tags.add tag and recipe2.tags.add tag. Now we're going to do res equals self.client.get tags URL assigned only 1. Self.assert equal len res.data 1. So what we're doing is we're creating two tags, one of which we're storing as the variable tag, and then we're creating two recipes, and we're adding the first tag that we created, breakfast, to both of the recipes. Then we're making a request to the tags URL with the assigned only equals 1 parameter, and we're asserting that the result only returns one item. So that's everything we do for the test. Let's go ahead and save the file, and let's rerun the test cases, and let's see if they pass or if they fail as expected. Okay, so it looks like we got some errors here. So we got one error and the rest failed. So it says got multiple values for argument self. So this is because I put self instead of user here in the ingredients API test. So let's just go ahead and fix that. Apologies, good job to you if you spotted it already. So let's find where I put this error here. So here we go. So when I created the first ingredient, it should have been user equals self.user, not self equals self.user. Okay, great. Now that that's fixed, let's go ahead and run them again. And we should expect all of the tests to fail, but there not to be any errors. So they're going to fail on the actual assertions as opposed to errors in the code. Okay, that looks better this time. We've got 2 failures. And then we should see another 2 failures. And they should fail on the results that were returned from these APIs. Okay, yeah, so we can see that it failed on the number that was returned here. So the test filter tags unique returned 2 when we expected 1. And then we also had the result of the serializer 2 in the response.data for this lunch example here. So we can be confident that the tests are failing as expected. Now let's move on to the next lesson.